Dusko Popov was born on July 10, 1912, in Tidal, a small town in what was then Austria-Hungary, now Serbia. But there was nothing small about his ambitions or his lifestyle. Born into a wealthy family, Popov enjoyed all the privileges that came with it: the best education, international travel, and an introduction to high society across Europe. His father was a successful businessman, which meant young Dusko grew up speaking multiple languages fluently: Serbo-Croatian, German, French, Italian, and English. This linguistic ability would later prove invaluable in his espionage career. But more than languages, Popov learned something else from his privileged upbringing: how to move effortlessly through elite social circles, how to charm, how to read people, and how to always appear in control. Popov studied law at the University of Belgrade before moving to Germany to continue his education at Freiburg University. It was here, in the heart of Nazi Germany during the 1930s, that the seeds of his espionage career were planted. While studying in Freiburg, Popov witnessed firsthand the rise of the Nazi Party. He saw the book burnings, the increasing militarization, the persecution of Jews and other minorities. Unlike many of his fellow students who were swept up in Nazi fervor, Popov was repulsed by it. But he kept his disgust hidden. This was perhaps his first lesson in the art of deception: showing one face while concealing your true thoughts and loyalties. He socialized with Nazi sympathizers, attended their gatherings, and all the while, his contempt for their ideology grew stronger. During his time in Germany, Popov made a crucial friendship with Johann Jebsen, a fellow student who would later become instrumental in Popov's intelligence career. Jebsen was charming, intelligent, and surprisingly, despite his background, deeply opposed to the Nazi regime. This friendship would shape both their destinies in ways neither could have imagined. After completing his studies, Popov returned to Yugoslavia and began practicing law. But his legal career was short-lived. The world was heading toward war, and Popov's unique position, educated, wealthy, well-connected across Europe, multilingual, and opposed to fascism, made him exactly the kind of person intelligence agencies were looking for. The transformation from playboy lawyer to double agent began in 1940, thanks to his old university friend Johann Jebsen. By this time, Jebsen was working for the Abwehr, German military intelligence. But Jebsen harbored serious doubts about the Nazi regime and saw in his old friend Popov an opportunity to work against Hitler from within. Jebsen approached Popov with a proposition: join the Abwehr as an intelligence agent. The pitch was carefully calculated. Popov would be paid well, gain access to elite circles, and serve the German cause. But both men knew the real game being played. Jebsen wanted someone he could trust on the inside, someone who shared his anti-Nazi sentiments. For Popov, this was an opportunity to actively fight fascism. Popov accepted, but with a plan. Almost immediately, he approached the British intelligence services and offered his services as a double agent. The British, through MI6 and later MI5, gave him the codename Scout, though he would become better known by his operational designation, Tricycle. The name allegedly came from his fondness for three-way romantic encounters, a detail that certainly adds to his Bond-like reputation. The setup was perfect. The Germans believed Popov was their agent, feeding them information about British operations. The British knew Popov was loyal to them and used him to feed false information back to the Germans, a practice known as disinformation. Popov became part of the famous double-cross system, Britain's extraordinarily successful program of turning German agents and using them to mislead Nazi intelligence. But being a double agent wasn't just about passing false information. Popov had to maintain his cover convincingly. This meant living the life of a wealthy playboy, frequenting casinos, staying in the finest hotels, dining at exclusive restaurants, and yes, romancing beautiful women. The Germans expected their agents to blend into high society, and Popov did so with remarkable enthusiasm. One of the most famous episodes in Popov's career occurred in 1941 at the Casino Estoril in neutral Portugal. This incident would later be claimed by Popov himself as one of the inspirations for Ian Fleming's Casino Royale, the first James Bond novel. Popov was at the casino conducting intelligence work when a Lithuanian gambler began making increasingly large and reckless bets. The man was loud, arrogant, and attracting considerable attention. Exactly the kind of behavior that endangered clandestine operations. Popov, needing to shut down the spectacle, engaged the Lithuanian in a high-stakes game of baccarat. The story goes that the Lithuanian bet $50,000, an enormous sum at the time. Popov, maintaining his cool exterior while his mission hung in the balance, calmly matched and raised the bet. The psychological warfare at the table was intense. Finally, the Lithuanian backed down, unable to cover the raised bet. Popov had won without even seeing the cards played. This incident, with its high stakes, cool nerve, and casino setting, would later appear in Fleming's imagination transformed into the famous card game between Bond and Le Chiffre. But here's the thing about Popov's story. Whether every detail is precisely accurate or slightly embellished over time, it captures something essential about his character. He was a man who understood that espionage wasn't just about secret messages and dead drops. It was about psychological dominance, about projecting confidence, about making your opponent believe you held all the cards. And Ian Fleming was there. Fleming was working in British naval intelligence at the time and was aware of Popov's operations. He may have even heard about this incident directly. The seeds of James Bond were being planted. Perhaps the most controversial and tragic episode of Popov's intelligence career involves what has become known as the Pearl Harbor Questionnaire. In August 1941, months before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Popov was sent by the Abwehr to the United States. His mission, ostensibly, was to establish a spy network in America. But Popov came bearing critical intelligence. The Germans had given him a questionnaire, a list of information they wanted him to gather. The questions were highly specific and focused intensely on Pearl Harbor. The exact layout of the naval base, the positioning of ships, the depths of the harbor, defensive capabilities, and the routines of the American Pacific Fleet. To any experienced intelligence officer, these questions screamed of an impending attack. The level of detail requested about Pearl Harbor specifically suggested that someone, likely Germany's Axis partner Japan, was planning an assault on the Hawaiian naval base. Popov immediately reported this to the FBI when he arrived in America. He met with J. Edgar Hoover, the legendary and controversial FBI director. This is where things went terribly wrong. Hoover and Popov clashed immediately. Hoover was suspicious of Popov's playboy lifestyle, his expensive tastes, his way with women, his gambling. Hoover, a man of rigid morality and deep paranoia, saw Popov as unreliable and possibly a double agent actually working for the Germans. The irony, of course, was that Popov was a double agent, but one working for the Allies. Hoover dismissed the Pearl Harbor questionnaire as either a ruse or simply not credible. He refused to take Popov seriously and did not pass the intelligence up the chain to military intelligence or the White House. Some historians argue that American intelligence agencies were so compartmentalized that even if Hoover had taken it seriously, the information might not have reached the right people in time. On December 7, 1941, Japanese aircraft attacked Pearl Harbor, killing over 2,400 Americans and pulling the United States into World War II. Popov was devastated. He believed that if Hoover had taken him seriously, the attack might have been anticipated and its impact mitigated. The question of whether the Pearl Harbor intelligence could have made a difference remains debated by historians. Some argue that even with Popov's warning, the specific timing and nature of the attack would have been difficult to predict. Others point out that this was just one of several intelligence indicators that were missed or ignored before Pearl Harbor. But for Popov, it remained one of his greatest regrets. A moment when his intelligence work could have saved thousands of lives but was ignored because of bureaucratic incompetence and personal prejudice. After the Pearl Harbor debacle, Popov returned to Europe where his work became increasingly vital to Allied operations. His greatest contribution came as part of Operation Fortitude, the massive deception campaign designed to mislead the Germans about where the D-Day invasion would occur. The Allies had decided to invade Nazi-occupied Europe through Normandy, but they needed the Germans to believe the invasion would come at Pas-de-Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel. If successful, this deception would keep German forces away from the actual invasion beaches, potentially saving thousands of Allied lives. Popov was one of several double agents used to feed false information to the Germans about Allied invasion plans. Through his abwehr handlers, he passed along carefully crafted misinformation about troop buildups, equipment positions, and strategic intentions, all pointing to Pas-de-Calais as the invasion site. The genius of Operation Fortitude lay in its complexity and consistency. It wasn't just about false reports from spies. The Allies created entire fake armies, complete with inflatable tanks and aircraft. They generated false radio traffic. They conducted deception operations to make Pas-de-Calais appear as the obvious target. And agents like Popov confirmed these deceptions through their reports to German intelligence. The operation was stunningly successful. Even after the Normandy landings began on June 6, 1944, Hitler remained convinced for crucial weeks that the real invasion would still come at Pas-de-Calais. He held back reinforcements from Normandy, giving the Allies time to establish their beachhead. Historians credit Operation Fortitude with significantly reducing Allied casualties during the invasion and contributing to its success. Popov's role in this cannot be overstated. He was considered one of the most trusted agents in the German network. When he reported something, the Germans believed it. This trust had been built up over years of careful work, of providing the Germans with enough genuine intelligence mixed with false information to seem credible. It was a dangerous balancing act. Provide too much real information and you help the enemy. Provide too little and you lose their trust and become useless. So how exactly did Dusko Popov inspire James Bond? The connection comes through Ian Fleming, who during the war worked in British naval intelligence. Fleming's role gave him access to intelligence operations and information about double agents like Popov. While Fleming and Popov may not have worked together directly, Fleming was certainly aware of Popov's activities and reputation. The parallels between Popov and Bond are striking. Both were sophisticated, multilingual, and comfortable in high society. Both gambled at casinos as part of their cover and their work. Both had a way with women that was as much tactical as personal. Romance could be a tool of espionage. Both operated in the gray areas between different intelligence services and enemy agents. Both exhibited cool nerve under pressure and a certain reckless courage. Popov himself claimed in his memoir that he was a model for James Bond, and many historians accept that he was at least one of several real-life spies who influenced Fleming's creation. The casino incident at Estoril, the sophisticated lifestyle, the complex double-dealing, these elements of Popov's real life found their way into Fleming's fiction. But there were important differences too. Popov wasn't a government employee with a license to kill. He was a volunteer who risked his life because he opposed fascism, not because it was his job. He didn't have gadgets from Q Branch or the institutional backing that Bond enjoyed. His protection came from his wits, his charm, and his ability to convince multiple intelligence agencies that he was working for them. In some ways, what Popov accomplished was more impressive than Bond's fictional exploits because it was real. There was no script, no guarantee of survival, no author ensuring a happy ending. Every meeting with his abwehr handlers could have been his last if they suspected his true loyalties. Every piece of intelligence he passed could have been scrutinized and found wanting. The tension wasn't manufactured for entertainment. It was the daily reality of his life. Fleming took these real elements and heightened them, adding the action sequences, the gadgets, the clear-cut morality of fiction. But the core of Bond, the sophisticated spy operating in a world of moral ambiguity, came from real people like Dusko Popov. When World War II ended, Popov's days as a double agent were over. But the transition to peacetime proved challenging. Unlike James Bond, who could simply move on to the next adventure, Popov had to figure out what to do with the rest of his life. The British were grateful for his service but couldn't publicly acknowledge it. Double agents worked in absolute secrecy, and revealing their identities could endanger other operations and operatives. Popov received some financial compensation for his wartime service, but nothing approaching what fictional spies in movies enjoy. He eventually settled in France and went into business, though with mixed success. The skills that made him an excellent spy, charm, risk-taking, psychological insight, didn't always translate well to peacetime business ventures. He married and had children, trying to build a normal life after years of living on the edge. In 1974, Popov published his memoir, Spy/Counterspy, which revealed his wartime activities and made his claim about inspiring James Bond. The book was controversial. Some in the intelligence community felt he revealed too much. Others questioned whether all his stories were entirely accurate or somewhat embellished over the decades. But the core truth of his service and his importance to Allied victory was undeniable. Popov's old friend Johann Jebsen, who had originally recruited him for the Abwehr, was not as fortunate. The Germans eventually became suspicious of Jebsen and arrested him in 1944. He died in German custody, the exact circumstances still unclear. Popov always maintained that Jebsen was a hero who had risked everything to work against the Nazis from within their own intelligence service. Dusko Popov died in 1981 at the age of 69. His passing received relatively little attention. The world of intelligence keeps its secrets even in death. But his legacy lives on, not just in the historical record of World War II espionage but in popular culture through the character he helped inspire. When you watch a James Bond film or read one of Fleming's novels, you're seeing a fictionalized, glamorized version of what people like Dusko Popov actually did. The real thing was messier, more morally complex, and far more dangerous than any movie could capture. There was no guarantee that the hero would survive until the credits rolled. What makes Popov's story so compelling is that he chose this life. He wasn't conscripted or ordered into espionage. He volunteered because he believed fascism had to be fought by any means necessary. He risked everything, his life, his family, his fortune, for that belief. And in doing so, he played a genuine role in defeating one of history's greatest evils. The real James Bond didn't have a license to kill, but he had something perhaps more valuable: the courage to risk everything for what he believed was right, the intelligence to navigate impossible situations, and the charm to make it all look easy. If you enjoyed learning about Dusko Popov and the real-life inspiration behind James Bond, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more fascinating stories from history. Let me know in the comments, would you have had the nerve to be a double agent like Popov? And what other real-life figures who inspired famous fictional characters should we cover next? Until next time, remember, sometimes the truth really is stranger than fiction.